Yeah, you're alright. Thank you, mate.
Refugees' welcome echoes through UK streets as protesters rally against far-right and Reform UK surge. These woke, brainwashed lefties really are stupid, but that's what makes them incredibly dangerous. I wonder how many illegal migrants she's taken into her home. Anybody care to take a guess?
None of my friends have come here raping any women. Just saw these two guys next to me. I said, "Are you going to the demonstration?" Then I looked and thought, "Oh shit, I'm in trouble," and realised they were opposite. And he said, "Well, they come here raping our women, don't they?" And they do. And I said, "No, none of my friends have come here raping any women." But it was kind of shitty. It really is horrible. That is the line that they take. They don't know anything.
And is that what you think of the Reform supporters?
Yes, hate them. Idiots, stupid, thick. Well, they don't understand, do they? Because they don't live or try to understand other communities or anything. It's horrible.
In a powerful display of defiance against the rising tide of far-right politics, thousands of demonstrators flooded the streets across Britain yesterday, rallying under the banners of Refugees' Welcome. Stop the far right, and stop far right, and stop racist Reform U. The protests, held in major cities including London, Manchester and Birmingham, were a clear rejection of the nationalist, anti-immigration rhetoric that has increasingly gripped sections of the country's political establishment. Chants of "say it loud, say it clear, refugees are welcome here," echoed through the streets, punctuated by passionate speeches from community leaders, MPs, and activists who condemned the scapegoating of migrants for Britain's economic woes. This is not about reform. It's about racism, pure and simple, said Zara Sultana, Labour MP for Coventry South, addressing a crowd gathered in Parliament Square. The far right wants us to blame the vulnerable instead of the powerful. We say no to that politics of hate. The protests were largely peaceful, though a handful of scuffles broke out when a small group of counter-protesters waving Union Jacks attempted to disrupt the marches. Police intervened swiftly to separate the groups, reporting only minor incidents and a few arrests for public disorder. For many who attended, the protest was about more than just opposing Reform UK. It was a broader statement against the normalization of xenophobic discourse in British politics. Activists pointed to recent government rhetoric, from Suella Braverman's controversial statements about a migrant invasion to Rishi Sunak's repeated calls to stop the boats, as evidence that anti-immigrant sentiment has become dangerously mainstream. When politicians use the language of the far right, it emboldens the real extremists, said Karen Doyle, a spokesperson for Movement for Justice. It's not just Reform OK. It's the whole political culture sliding to the right. We have to stand up now before it's too late. Among the banners and handmade signs, many bore photographs of refugees who have contributed significantly to British society: doctors, teachers, community leaders. Others simply carried stark reminders of human tragedy. Images of drowned migrants and war-torn cities, challenging the public to remember the stakes behind the slogans. Young people turned out in force, many attending their first protest. "We're not going to let Britain become a hostile, racist country," said 19-year-old university student Amina Hussein, who had traveled from Leeds. The far right wants to make immigrants the enemy. We know better. We know our history. And we know that refugees have made Britain stronger, not weaker. As the protest drew to a close with a mass sit in a Trafalgar Square, organizers vowed to maintain momentum. Further demonstrations are already planned in the coming weeks, with many hoping to turn this wave of public outrage into tangible political pressure ahead of the next general election.
We've got the Telegraph now with good news. Labour are going to pay your rent, but you'll have to pretend to be an illegal immigrant, Lewis.
Yes, and this is if you rent homes, there could be money coming in. This is in the Sunday Telegraph, and it's written by a guy who thought money was going to come in because Serco had put out the word that they're going to have some big, huge get-together for all the landlords, where they're going to offer landlords an ability to rent their flats for 5 years, cash immediately.
Yeah, with the government paying, and obviously the government's not gonna default. Well, not this year. I mean, the way the government's handling our finances is going to default at some point.
Yeah.
But yeah, they're going to offer landlords 5 years rent up front, managing, paying for all the repairs on the property, and all they have to do is take in illegal immigrants, which would have created this horrible incentive for landlords to boot out whatever regular working tax-paying British person is in there to make way for people who've entered the country illegally.
And there won't be flats for them to rent, for anybody to rent.
Exactly.
This is horrible. It could be a part of communization of we're going to take over all of the flats. They have the leases already, and they just say, okay, this is ours now. Is that right?
Just quickly, you said pretend to be an illegal immigrant. Lewis doesn't have to pretend. But on a serious note, I mean, I've said this is like the government issuing drone strikes on our towns and cities and villages, because everywhere around the country you're going to place migrants. Think of the social cost for a start. Places like South Lakes, where I'm from, Lancaster, small places, you're just going to put migrants there. It's completely insane and disgusting. Landlords, as this article says, are heavily incentivized to go along with it. As you say, bills are paid, everything's done for you. They have to have great moral courage to say no to it, like John Mappin did. You just got to say, if you're a landlord, you have a moral duty to your country to say no to it. But how is this going to work for votes? Because maybe Labour has a plan, I have no idea, to get migrants eventually voting or something. Because when you get a load of migrants suddenly in your little town, you are going to vote against whoever did that. Yeah. You may not admit it in your WI meeting, but you are going to vote against that party. And that's called revealed preference, and you can put your money on that. But if they get enough people in the country voting for Labour, then again, they might vote independent for one of these Palestine people.
And yeah, you've got to remember Team World, the global communists, they're thinking on a long-term scale. If they can bring in enough people into the UK, then, because we're already at, 25% of the people in the UK, were born overseas, or the, descendants, first generation people born overseas. So if you can bring in enough people who are, likely to vote Labour, then over time, you're tilting the electoral landscape, and by moving them out of the cities and into the suburbs and the leafy places where Tory voters live, then you're tilting the electoral balance towards Labour long term.
They're a very dangerous game, sorry, if that is the case, because we get these independents spring up and then they beat Labour by being more sort of pro-foreign causes.
That's what happens now, but at the end of the day, I think there's an undercurrent is like, we don't care about whether we get re-elected, we just hate white people.
Openly. The government runs training courses about abolishing whiteness. It's insane that, essentially genocide is just written into legislation and openly sort of indoctrinated into people, and nobody's turning around and saying, wait a minute, is it right to abolish whiteness?
Is that a good point?
Yeah, I'm a lefty. I care about small island indigenous populations with gentle, eccentric ways. That's me. I'm like a hippie, really.
Yeah, the Angles, the Saxons, the Jutes, the Picts,
There it is. He's sponsored to say that every show.
The Brooklyn Jews.